What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and this is the most evil version of Superman in all of comics. This is Superman from the New 52 Earth 2. Now, here's a crazy thing, because this opens up with him basically shouting, "All hail Darkseid." So the question has to be asked, how in the world did Superman become a Darkseid villain? Well, here's the cool thing. We only really know from the very beginnings of Earth 2, and between then and now, he returns as a villain. Now, we did cover the video on the beginnings of Earth 2, so I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check it out. The long and short of it is that while Darkseid was launching an invasion of the main DC universe during the New 52 Justice League, his general Steppenwolf was launching an attack against the Earth 2 universe. In the first issue, Batman and Wonder Woman both die. Wonder Woman's killed, Batman sacrifices himself, and Superman ends up being taken by parademons. After that, we don't see him again until now. And when he shows up as an agent of Darkseid, he starts crushing everybody, like literally taking everybody out everywhere he can. Now, his return also coincides with Steppenwolf launching a secondary attack after having previously been defeated, for lack of a better word. And that in this ensuing attack, Steppenwolf was killed, only for Superman to emerge and make his presence known, only for him to have the goal of carrying out the will of Darkseid. We'll talk about what that means here in a little bit. But one of the things that ends up going on is you actually see the activation of the Red Tornado Project. Now, one of the cool things about Earth 2 is these are what were called the wonders of the world, kind of a reworking of the superhero mythos to a degree. And so the Red Tornado Project is actually created by General Lane. The idea being that with the death of Lois Lane, she's brought back as Red Tornado. So now she's one of the wonders of the world that exists out there. The other part of this is that the World Army at Arkham Base is being completely obliterated by Superman single-handedly. Now, the World Army was just kind of a coming together of the nations of the world to quite literally create an army in order to hold off against any potential threat that exists out there. Initially, they came together in response to the invasion of Steppenwolf, and they helped Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman against that massive threat. But once the wonders of the world were destroyed and Steppenwolf became the primary threat, that's when the World Army both started working to deal with any potential wonders that may exist out there, both as seeing them as a threat and something to control. So the World Army was almost kind of a stand-in for the ideology of Amanda Waller, to a degree, within the Earth 2 universe. The other cool thing here is Superman has the Omega Beams. And that's dope, because when he sets his sights on you, man, there's no getting away from that. And so what you end up doing is switching over to the actual World Army while they're basically sounding a full retreat. Now, a lot of you guys will notice here, you do have Michael Holt, Mr. Terrific. This version of Mr. Terrific is actually from the main DC universe. That was from Eric Wallace's New 52 Mr. Terrific. Issue number 8, the final issue of the story, actually had him yanked through basically a quantum tunnel and thrown into this reality where he had been here ever since, and he has his own narrative, right? But the fact is, with all of this going on right now, you initially have this question that they're asking of, how do we deal with Superman, right? That's why Michael Holt says he's unstoppable. On my world, the only thing he's vulnerable to is kryptonite. So even if the World Army has access to some, he's not just going to stand still and wait for it to affect him. And that is where Dr. Fate chimes in and says, magic, right? We can use magic to overcome Superman. Now, the other part of this is when you switch back over to General Lane, after the activation of the Red Tornado Project, he's told by somebody that, like, literally someone's broken into the Arkham facility and is just taking out all these different guards. They don't necessarily know who it is. They know it's not Superman, but they know it's somebody else who seems to be equally as dangerous. And once these guards are making their way through this facility, it turns out it's Batman. Batman's crushing all these guys. Now, yes, Batman died in the first issue. Batman is back. Do not spoil this in the comments. Please, for the love of God, don't be a dick. But it's one of the coolest revelations of his character. It's super dope once you actually get to it. But again, switching back here to Dr. Fate, this is not Kent Nelson, as you would expect. It's actually Khaled, right? He's a person that became the new Dr. Fate. You also have the Flash here, but this is Jay Garrick. And Jay Garrick actually got his powers from literally the Greek god Mercury. Again, all that's covered in the other issues. We can cover them if you're interested, right? But it's pretty dope, right? Because at that point, you have Dr. Fate who goes out there to confront Superman. And as soon as he shows up, Superman is on his ass. Like literally he's like, I was waiting for you, right? Like you think I couldn't hear you talking about me in there? And so like right off the bat, like he just gets demolished. I mean, Superman just stomps this guy. This fight lasts maybe like 10 seconds, if that, right? And Superman's just like, no more magic, and like stomps this guy's head into the ground. Now it's not enough to kill him, but it's only because Jay Garrick shows up in the nick of time to like grab him and whisk Dr. Fate out of there. Of course, he ends up catching up to Connor Hawke, basically the new Green Arrow, or I guess Red Arrow at this point. And then at that moment, Dr. Fate just starts babbling, right? He just keeps saying things like crumbles. Right, crumbles the queen, it crumbles green, and just keeps going on and on and on. Crumbles the queen, speed broken, the child, the resurrected hope, angel in the slaughter, they come from the fires. The alien crumbles green, it crumbles, and just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And so at this point, they're like, okay, like Superman absolutely yanked this guy's rocker, right? He's totally out of his mind. And so at that point, you switch back over to Lois as Red Tornado, only to find out that in all the ensuing chaos in the fight with Superman, her dad's dead now, right? Or at least dying anyway. So General Lane is effectively out of the picture. And so that's when you pick back up with Batman. Making his way through this facility, one of the things that we end up learning here, or at least already kind of knew, is that the World Army was again rounding up various villains and even any individuals that they believed had powers that could work for or against them. It was better to keep them under control than it was to just kind of let them roam around freely for any number of reasons, some of which made sense and some of which didn't. But when Batman gets in here, he starts talking to Major Sato. Now, of course, Major Sato is chiming in with the World Army and letting them know what's going on here, but you get this really, really cool moment because in this instance, the Joker is one of the people who's locked up. And when the question's asked, like, why are you in here? Why are you doing this? Batman just says, there are people in here who can help us fight against Superman. And so initially Sato is just like, look around you, right? There's nothing in here but criminals and madmen. And the response of Batman, I've been both of those things, but the world's scarred and burning. Dark gods preparing to claim it. Criminals and madmen may be Earth's only hope. And so it's kind of this amazing moment because while all that's going on, you have Jay Garrick and they're trying to figure out how to evacuate without Superman using his Omega beams to basically destroy everybody. And so Jay Garrick just like throws a rock at the head of Superman, right? And Superman's like, who would dare hit me with a rock? Now this is just designed to be a distraction because it gives Jay Garrick the ability to draw Superman's attention and then race off. Of course, Superman being as pissed off as he is, would chase after Jay Garrick because Superman's main priority here is to take out everybody who has superpowers. Once they're done and gone, the world is easy pickings, right? Normal humans with guns, they're no real threat for Superman or any of the other parademons at all. So of course, he chases after Jay. And so when you switch back over to Batman, his conversation with Dr. Sato, she says, like, you're not Batman. I was there when he died. And the response of Batman is, I should have been, right? I was not there when he died, but I am here now in his name. He spoke very highly of you, Major Sato. The woman he talked about would never execute a room full of defenseless people. And she's like, you're right? I wouldn't do that because she's got a detonator in her hand and she's ready to blow the whole room to keep Batman from getting his hands on everybody in here. And he says, thank you. There are 3 people in here that I need. And Sato immediately chimes in and says, although I do find it very, very strange that Batman would think of me so highly, seeing as we never actually met. And so Batman's just like, I don't have time for this. Tries to smack the detonator out of her hand. It doesn't work. He ends up knocking her to the ground and then grabs the detonator from her, breaks the thing in half. And that's where she's like, you're not human, right? What in the world are you? But before he can say anything, Red Tornado shows up here and Lois grabs a hold of him. Now, here's the funny thing about this is that her being an android, she's incredibly strong, but Batman just grabs her arm and removes it, clearly displaying super strength. And that's where Lois is just like, what happened to you, Bruce? And it catches Batman by surprise for a moment, only for Dr. Sato to fire off a shot. Now, initially, Lois thinks that like he's dead, right? I mean, she doesn't really know that Batman, of course, would have like a bulletproof helmet. One of the first things he would think of having in his arsenal, but like once they turn around after a little bit of an argument, they realize Batman's gone. And then they realize that he's at one of the machines and activating it, only for them to find out the person he's basically waking up is Aquawoman. Now, here's the cool thing about this. Aquawoman is dope over the course of this story. Like she's gonna have a really, really cool moment here in a second. But this again is more Batman marshaling forces than anything else. And so you switch back over to the moment where Superman is chasing down Jay Garrick. And again, Jay Garrick is still kind of learning his powers to a degree. It's one of the great things about the Earth 2 stories is that by the time you get around to like volume 4, volume 5, things like that, these guys have been around for a pretty decent chunk of time, but they haven't been around nearly as long as like Barry Allen in the main DC universe, or Wally West, or Superman in the main DC universe, meaning they don't necessarily have as strong of an understanding of their powers as the main superheroes do. So they're kind of figuring out what they're capable of. This is why Jay Garrick says things like, he's never pushed it this hard before, he's never moved at these speeds. And I can't shake him, I cannot shake Superman. So I have to buy them time to evacuate, I have to go faster. But again, Superman catches up to him. And here's the cool thing about this, right? Superman figures out very quickly that when it comes to someone like Jay Garrick, his power is speed, right? Running incredibly fast. And he says things like, given the kind of power that you have, you could be of great use to Darkseid. And so what he does is he breaks Jay Garrick's ankle, literally snaps his ankle on the spot, because if he can't run, his powers don't work. And so again, it's pretty wonky here, because what ends up happening is Superman travels back to Terry Sloan and Michael Holt. Now, Terry Sloan's pretty cool, because in DC Comics, Terry Sloan was actually the original Mr. Terrific before Michael Holt was. Now, in Earth 2, it's not necessarily the same way. He's just kind of like the genius here that uses his mind in order to figure out ways to defeat superheroes or to certainly deal with guys like Steppenwolf. He's a major player both on the front lines, so to speak, as well as behind the scenes. But what Superman says is, given the level of intelligence of both men, they would be of great use to Darkseid. And so at this point, there's nowhere they can go, and there's really nothing they can do. They are effectively prisoners. And so at that moment, you jump back to Batman. Now, Batman continuing on here, right, unleashing these various individuals, the question's asked, right, this particular stasis chamber that he's unlocking is literally just encased in black. It's just a metal tube all the way around, as opposed to being translucent like the others. And the question's asked why, right? And Batman says, because the World Army has many atrocities to hide. And that's when they realize the person in here is just a kid. And Major Sato is like, why in the world would they just go after a kid? Why would they lock a kid up like this? And that's where Batman asks, you've heard of the group Accountable, right? And she's like, yes, but that's where Aquawoman is like, what in the world is the Accountable? And Major Sato explains, she says, it's a group of traitors who hack into private systems and release information online. They've publicly released thousands of top secret World Army documents. And of course, Lois asks, so like this kid is part of Accountable? And Batman says, no, this kid can gain access to anything. He breathes information. James Olsen is accountable. James Olsen has a photographic memory. Everything he sees, he remembers. He never forgets. And so at that point, once he realizes that he's been locked up, that he hasn't really been held prison until like the year 3000, which is kind of what he was hoping for, to be honest. Like, you know, you always kind of imagine that when you're put in stasis, you're going to be there for like 1,000 years or something like that. But again, like once he's freed, he's like, I need someone's phone. I have to get caught up on everything that's going on. So he literally just fires up an app and starts looking over everything. And he's like, okay, so a continent was destroyed yesterday, Superman is back, but he's a douche, and parademons. And he's like, it's happening right now, right? I'm trying to make sense of all of it. And Batman's like, what in the world are you talking about? And he's like, they're coming out of the fire pits. And the question's asked, like, what fire pits are they coming out of? And Jimmy's like, it would be easier to tell you, they're coming from everywhere. They're all over the place. It's a full-on invasion of the world, just like it was 5 years ago. Because that's what happened, right? 5 years before, when the original superheroes died, it was a full-on invasion of Earth, preparing the world to be conquered in Darkseid's name. And the whole history is repeating itself. Now, here's the crazy thing. Batman finally walks up to the final tank, and he's like, there's one more person that I came for. And at that point, it's just like, no way, right? Like, that's the Joker. You cannot release the Joker. And Batman's like, I never said that I was going to release him. He fires a shot off into his dome piece. He literally kills the Joker inside of his own tank and just walks away. And he's like, now we can go. It's pretty hardcore, man. A Batman who's not afraid to kill. And so at that point, you pick back up with Superman, who basically snatches up Jay Garrick, Michael Holt, and Terry Sloan and races off in order to prepare them for whatever task he has planned. And so what ends up happening is that as they're making their way through this facility, they come upon their final destination, the spot where Batman is like, we really have one other person to get out of here. Now, here's something that's really, really dope, and you guys are going to love this, because what happens is that as they're trying to make their way, Batman and company, as they're trying to make their way out of this facility, Jimmy Olsen chimes in and is like, we cannot leave yet. And the question is like, why? And he's like, the reason they locked me away, the reason they came for me at all, it's here, the alien. I hacked into Sloane's personal files and I found out about his alien. And it's like, what alien are you talking about, right? And like, Major Sato's like, I have no clue what he's talking about. And the response of James, of course you don't. That's because some politician with decision-making skills of a walnut decided to put Terry Sloane, one of the most evil douches to ever violate the earth, in charge of your World Army's science division. But trust me, Sloane has an alien, possibly a Martian, locked away in your sub-basement. And that's where Major Sato's like, there is no sub-basement, right? This is the lowest level in the facility. And Lois, in looking around, is like, no, it's not. Right? There are people below us. And of course, you end up having Aquawoman who busts a hole in the floor. They all go charging down. Initially, the guards of the store try to fire on everybody. Of course, Aquawoman's not killed at all. And it's just like, if you value your lives, you will walk away. And of course, because these guys value their lives, they walk away. And so at this point, it's time to open the door. And that's where Batman is just like, I don't know what's on the other side of that door, but prepare to hit it with everything you have if necessary, right? Of course, talking to Lois. And of course, he's like, Aquawoman, tear the door down. Only for one of the guards to just be like, no. I mean, look, right? He's not dangerous, right? If you tear down that door, you might scare him. Just chill and I'll open it for you. And when they open the door, it's just a dude standing in a room. And he's just like, hey. Now, anybody who's familiar with Earth 2 in DC Comics knows exactly who this is. And one of you guys have been asking nonstop for me to cover his character. Of course, this is Valzad. Now, here's the cool thing about this, right? At that point, you switch back over to Superman, who drops Michael Holt, Terry Sloane, and Jay Garrick in front of the White House. And at that point, because you have Bedlam, basically an agent of Darkseid, who has mind control powers and is seemingly controlling Superman, that what Superman does is he parades out in front of the whole world. And he's like, you know what I remember of these people, Bedlam, how important symbols are to them. They build great monuments to power, to achievement. Symbols are so important. And so it's time for our own symbol of power. So Superman races over to the Washington Monument, pulls the whole thing out of the ground, and crashes it into the White House. He literally obliterates the entirety of the White House. And it's just like, this is done. The world as you know it is effectively over. And so at that point, you switch back over to Valzad. Now, here's where things are awesome, because he's just like, is everything okay, Kim? Of course, Kim being the guard, you know, she's like, everything's fine, right? These people are just here for a visit. And he's like, oh, cool, visitors. I made some tea. Like, I really hope you like chamomile. And Batman's like, yes. No, of course I like chamomile. And so they ask the question, why are you locked in here? And the response of Val, like, I'm not locked in here. I'm here for my own protection. Terry says I'm free to go whenever I like. And of course, that kind of clues everybody into the fact that Terry is not actually the hero that he claims to be. He's a pretty dark guy with a pretty dark and sketchy past. Again, a lot of that is covered over the course of the Earth 2 stories leading up to this moment. So it's not something that's like totally new, and it's not like a trick or a ruse or anything like that. But during this conversation, Valzad starts to sweat, and he kind of starts to show all these different signs of sickness, right? And he literally looks to Batman and he was like, you, right? Like, you hurt. There's something wrong with you. And initially Batman's like, he's reacting to something, right? This room may have been protecting him from our environment, and then at that moment, Batman's like, I know what this is. And he literally pulls out a piece of green kryptonite, and Batman's like, he's Kryptonian. He's a Kryptonian, right? And so at that point, you switch back over to Superman, right? And Superman's just like, people of Earth, apocalypse is dying. The gods have outlived their planet, but a new apocalypse will be born. Your planet is being readied. The fire pits burn and the parademons spread across the world to quash any resistance. The weak will die. But for those of you who are strong, for those of you who are willing to struggle and fight for your existence, a glorious future awaits. Soon you will serve. Rejoice, for you have been chosen. All hail Darkseid. And so that's when you find out what the plan is for Michael Holt and Terry Sloane. Because at that point, Bedlam turns his attention to them and basically reveals that what he wants them to do is to create a boom tube large enough to pull Earth into the realm of Apocalypse so that Earth can become the new Apocalypse. And so, of course, Terry Sloan and Michael Holt aren't too keen on doing this, but Bedlam, having the ability to control minds, starts imposing his will on them. And so at that moment, you switch back to Batman and the rest of the team while they're carrying out an unconscious Valzad, right? Having basically succumbed or at least passed out due to the effects of kryptonite. But as they start to make their way up to the exit, they still have Jimmy with them. And it's one of the things where Batman's like, he's got a photographic memory, right? Like, we cannot let him see what's going on out there, because if he sees it, he will never forget it. To Jimmy's ears, it sounds like battle, right? It sounds like conflict is what's happening. But Batman's like, no, right? There's something horrible happening out there, and they actually blindfold him. And so when Aquawoman opens the door and saying, it's not fighting, she says, it's a massacre, because what's happening out there is all these parademons are tearing the humans to pieces if they're not whisking them off to convert them into more parademons, which is a pretty horrific process if you ever read the New 52 Justice League. But it's kind of wild, right? Because humans never truly stood a chance here. And so at that moment, Red Tornado is instructed to grab Valzad and Jimmy and get them out of there as fast as humanly possible. Aquawoman stays behind to deal with some of the threats while making her escape alongside Major Sato. And then Batman's like, I will find my own way out, which ultimately ends up leading to Hawkgirl swooping in, grabbing Batman, Major Sato, and then Aquawoman, and then basically flying away. But amidst all this chaos and all this pandemonium, we're given this amazing epilogue to this part of the story where it says, yesterday, the warrior god Steppenwolf of Apocalypse was murdered here. His death tore a gaping wound in the earth. Millions died in an instant, but something won't stay dead. Something cannot stay dead. Something green. So literally, the Green Lantern. Right now, here's a cool thing, right? It's so dope, right? Here's a cool thing. So at that point, you switch over to Hawkgirl, grabbing, Aquawoman and Batman and Major Sato and whisking them out of there as fast as humanly possible. Along the way, they are chased after by parademons, but Aquawoman can control water. And so one of the things that happens while they're up in the sky is she literally pulls rainwater out of the clouds, right? Pulls moisture out of the air and starts using it against the parademons in order to basically take them out and buy them time. It allows everybody else to essentially escape, but it's a pretty dope display of power. Now, of course, once everybody gets to safety, she's like, look, I need to go tend to my people. This is a worldwide invasion. Atlantis needs me, right? Because Atlantis has not been with a meaningful leader since any of this has gone down. And so she just tells Batman, blow into this shell, and when you do, I will hear you, right? And Atlantis will respond. So she's not leaving them hanging for everything. But at that point, Batman and them all end up getting back to headquarters, only to find Dr. Fate just continuing to ramble yet again, right? Crumbles. The Queen, the Child, the Resurrected Hope, Angel in the Slaughter, the Alien, the Murderer, crumbles, boom, it crumbles. Just over and over and over and over again, just saying the same thing all the time. Not only that, Batman's like, where's the Kryptonian, right? And that's where Lois is like, he's over here. And the question's asked, like, what's wrong with this guy? And Jimmy's like, I don't know, right? He just started freaking out as soon as we left the base. And the question is asked, is he sick? And the response of Batman, no, right? He's not sick. He's hyperventilating. He's having a panic attack. Now, of course, Batman, being the least gentle superhero ever in the history of comics, is just like, look, the kryptonite's locked up, man. It's not going to hurt you. You need to chill out, right? But it takes a kind of tender hand, right? A gentler hand than Batman to deal with something like this. So it actually ends up with Lois talking to him directly, right? Talking to Valzad one-to-one. And you get a little bit of his story here. And one of the things he kind of reveals is that he is Kryptonian, right? He was one of 4 sent away before the planet Krypton was destroyed. And so the question is asked, were you in your capsule your entire life until you arrived on Earth, right? The escape pod that he was sent away in. And he says, yes. And so at that point, Lois looks at Batman and she's like, his whole life in a capsule. No wonder he was happy in a cell. And that's when Batman figures out he's agoraphobic. And he's like, well, that's just great, right? And Lois is just like, hey, like, you need to chill. And he's like, the world is being conquered, Lois. We've just discovered possibly the only person who can stand up to Superman. We don't have time for him to be afraid of open spaces. And at that point, Lois is like, yeah, and I'm sure you screaming at him is probably going to make him feel better. She's like, just let me talk to him, right? Let me have a conversation with him. And so while all that's going on, Superman makes this like wild declaration to all the parademons, right? He says, there's only one God, and it's time to spread his glory. Tear them down. every place of worship, every church, every cathedral, every synagogue, every mosque, every temple, every shrine to the fictions they have invented, every statue they've erected to false idols. Let them know their beliefs are lies. There is only one God. There is only Darkseid. And so at that point, you switch over to Lois, having her conversation with Valzad. And they do find a lot of kind of commonality among their own individual stories, because she says, I know you're scared, but trust me, I'm scared too. And Val's like, I mean, why are you afraid? And she's like, well, because as I understand it, yesterday I was dead. I woke up to find myself in this metal body. I learned that someone that looks like my husband is a mass murdering zealot preparing to take over the world. And then I watched my father die. So I'm scared too. And to tell you the truth, part of me feels like sitting in a corner and hugging my knees and hoping all of it goes away. And initially Val is like, I mean, I recommend it, right? Like, it's working for me. But the response of Lois is no, right? It's not me. And initially Lois is like, I mean, look, I get it, but that's not me. That's not who I am, right? Right now, the whole world is afraid. And whenever other people are threatened by just evil beings, that's when I tend to get so pissed off that I forget to be scared. And so she asks him, like, do you know what you're capable of? Do you know what Earth's Son does? And the response of Val is no. And she's like, are you lying? And he says, yes. But he's like, I don't want to hurt anybody, right? Valzad is a pacifist. He doesn't want to inflict harm. And that's where Lois is like, good. That's exactly how Superman felt. And it's one of the most important things, right? Superman never went out of his way to harm people unless there was no other option. And even then, he would minimize harm in order to simply neutralize the threat. Now, if the threat was significant enough, say somebody like Darkseid, or even someone like Doomsday, of course, Superman would fight to the bitter end, sacrificing his life and killing the other guy in order to make sure the day was saved. But when it comes to virtually any threat out there, Superman never wants to kill. It's his main MO. He never wants to do that. There's always a better way. And that's why she tells Valzad, you remind me so much of Superman, because he was just like you. He never wanted to kill if he didn't have to. He always valued the sanctity of life, right? Superman is my husband, and I know him. No matter what happened to me, no matter what anyone did to him, he's simply too gentle, too true, and too stubborn to be turned into a monster. And so whatever that is out there is not truly the man on the inside. And so Valzad is just like, I don't want to fight Lois. And she's like, I'm not asking you to, but you're a Kryptonian on Earth. You cannot stay indoors. And so what they end up doing is opening these gigantic doors. And for seemingly the first time, the first real meaningful time in his life, Valzad is exposed to yellow sun radiation. Literally, he starts to begin developing the powers of Superman. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. I know I'm leaving you guys on a massive cliffhanger. Let me know if you guys want to see what happens next, because Valzad is amazing. I love Valzad as a character. Tom Taylor's Earth 2 run was incredible. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.